Have you ever agreed to something that didn't feel right? Trusted someone who later showed their true face? Sacrificed your needs just to keep the peace? If so, you may not have made a mistake. You may have been manipulated. And the most dangerous kind of manipulation is the one you never notice. The one that disguises itself as kindness, love, or loyalty. It's subtle. It doesn't come with a warning. It comes in the form of a smile, a compliment, or even a guilt trip laced in, "I'm just worried about you." Manipulators don't force you. They make you volunteer. They don't raise their voice. They lower yours. They study your emotions, your patterns, your wounds, and then they play you like a quiet song you can't stop humming. This isn't just personal, it's everywhere. At work, in friendships, even in family dynamics. The moment someone knows your emotional pressure points, your fear of rejection, your hunger for approval, your guilt about saying no, you become a puppet and they pull the strings while you thank them for it. The worst part, you think it's your fault. That's how deeply they've shaped your perception. But here's the truth no one tells you. Manipulation doesn't always look like control. It often looks like love, loyalty, or even help. That's why it works. Psychology teaches us that emotional control isn't about domination. It's about influence. Those who understand human behavior don't need to yell or demand. They only need to make you feel seen, scared, or special. And if you don't recognize the patterns, you'll keep playing the same emotional role over and over again, thinking it's love when it's just strategy. So ask yourself, who's really in control of your decisions? Have you ever felt guilt for setting a boundary? Have you been told you're selfish for protecting your energy? The first step to reclaiming your power is brutal honesty. Watch your patterns. Question your yes. And most of all, ask why you feel what you feel. Because if you don't know what's driving you, someone else does. Have you ever realized you were being manipulated after the fact? Share your story in the comments. Let's bring this truth to the surface. You're not being controlled because you're weak. You're being controlled because someone found a wound you never realized you had. That's how manipulation really works. Not through force or obvious threats, but through the silent cracks in your emotional foundation. And the worst part? You don't even see it happening. You think you're making your own decisions. But in reality, you're reacting to old pain, unmet needs, and beliefs planted in you long before you ever met the manipulator. Maybe it's your need to be liked that makes you say yes when everything in you screams no. Maybe it's guilt. Guilt that was passed down through culture, religion, or family that whispers you're a bad person for setting boundaries. Or maybe it's fear. Fear of being abandoned, replaced, forgotten. These aren't just feelings. They're emotional blueprints. And manipulators? They are architects of your behavior. They don't fight you. They study you. They spot what you fear, what you crave, and they tailor their words, tone, and silence to wrap around your subconscious like a net. Have you ever noticed how they make you feel guilty for protecting your peace? Or how they praise you just enough to keep you loyal, but criticize you just enough to keep you insecure? That's not a coincidence. That's strategy. Manipulators don't need to push you. They just need to touch what's already hurting. And until you face that pain, until you bring those hidden vulnerabilities into the light, you'll keep falling into the same emotional traps over and over again. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is exactly what happens when you don't know your emotional wounds. You end up living a life that's not yours, controlled by guilt, fear, and unresolved trauma, while someone else benefits from your silence and self-abandonment. So here's the real question. What hidden emotion is driving your decisions? Approval? Fear? Shame? Until you name it, you can't reclaim it. People often confuse emotional strength with indifference. But let's set the record straight. Becoming emotionally immune doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop collapsing. It's not about building walls. It's about building awareness. You're not cold. You're conscious. And that changes everything. Most of us go through life reacting automatically. Someone criticizes us, we explain. Someone blames us unfairly, we defend. Someone disrespects us, we chase clarity. But what if I told you every one of those reactions is costing you energy and power? That every emotional response you don't choose consciously is actually a form of silent surrender? Emotional immunity is the ability to pause, not because you're detached, but because you're deeply connected to yourself. It's when you feel the emotional trigger, the heat, the sting, the urge to react. And instead of letting it drag you, you breathe, you observe, you ask yourself, do I need to respond? Or is this just another performance I've been conditioned to play? Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. And many of us resist silence. We resist stillness. We resist not reacting because we think doing nothing is weakness. But in truth, the most powerful people are the ones who can sit in discomfort without immediately trying to fix it. This kind of clarity doesn't come from reading a quote or watching a video. It comes from practice. It comes from choosing not to answer the message right away, from walking away instead of defending yourself, from saying no without guilt. That is emotional discipline. That is psychological strength. That is immunity. So no, you don't need to become cold, but you do need to become unavailable to chaos. You need to stop being emotionally readable because manipulators rely on your emotional predictability. And if you're still wondering whether this applies to you, ask yourself, how often do I respond just to be liked? How often do I explain just to avoid guilt? That's not communication. That's conditioning. There comes a moment in your growth when you realize you can't keep giving all of yourself to people who don't even recognize the cost. You've been taught that caring means being constantly available, that love means losing sleep, bending boundaries just to keep the peace. But let's be honest, who is protecting your peace while you're busy preserving theirs? Strategic detachment is not cruelty. It's not arrogance. It's self-respect in its most refined form. It's the quiet decision to no longer explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. It's stepping back, not to abandon, but to observe, to reclaim your energy, your time, your mind. The world will call you cold when you stop reacting, when you don't answer right away, when you don't offer emotional CPR to people who only remember you when they're bleeding. But the truth, you are not cold. You are clear. Clear on who deserves your attention, clear on what costs too much, clear on the difference between presence and performance. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Detachment is how you make the unconscious conscious. It's how you realize that not every text requires a reply, not every argument deserves your breath, and not every cry for help is genuine, especially from those who drain you dry. When you stop reacting, you start revealing. You show people who they really are when their manipulations no longer land. When your silence becomes your answer and your distance becomes your boundary. That's when the masks fall off. Not yours, theirs. Strategic detachment is your armor in a world obsessed with emotional chaos. And it doesn't make you less kind. It makes your kindness intentional, protected, no longer scattered like breadcrumbs for those who'd only follow you until they're full. So ask yourself today, where do I need to pull back? Who am I over-explaining to? What am I tolerating just to feel needed? Have you ever watched someone completely unravel simply because you refuse to react? That's the power of emotional silence. It's not passive. It's not weakness. It's a masterstroke of control in a world addicted to noise. Most people speak just to fill the void. They argue to be right. They lash out to be seen. But the one who masters silence, not the kind born of fear, but the kind rooted in awareness, holds the real power in any room. Because silence disrupts the game. It forces the manipulator to face their own reflection without your emotions to shield them from it. When you don't react, they lose their weapon. They no longer know what controls you, what moves you, what breaks you. And that confusion, that's where your dominance begins. Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. What you accept transforms. But silence, strategic silence, is the bridge between resistance and acceptance. It's how you observe your emotions without letting them hijack you. It's how you regain control over your internal world while everyone else is busy trying to control the external. Silence makes people wonder. Wondering makes them fear. And fear, when in the psychological arena, creates space, space for you to breathe, to choose, to no longer be pulled by every emotional current around you. That's how you reclaim your energy, your time, your sanity. So the next time someone tries to bait you into explaining, defending, or justifying, don't. Let your silence echo louder than your words ever could. In a world that feeds on constant access, conscious unavailability isn't cruelty, it's survival. When you stop being emotionally available to everyone, something powerful happens. The chaos around you begins to quiet. The people who once drained you become confused. They wonder what changed. They start to panic. But the truth is, nothing changed. You simply stop being emotionally rentable. We've been conditioned to respond instantly, to pick up every call, to explain ourselves, to be nice even when we're exhausted. But emotional discipline means realizing that your availability is a currency, and not everyone deserves to spend it. Carl Jung taught that individuation, becoming your true self, requires retreat. It requires space. And you can't find yourself when you're constantly entangled in the noise of everyone else's expectations. When you say no, when you don't reply, when you step back without guilt, you're not being distant. You're reclaiming your peace. The truth is, those who benefit from your overavailability will call you cold the moment you choose yourself. But don't be fooled. Their discomfort is not a reflection of your wrongness. It's proof that your boundaries are working. You are no longer giving them the emotional access they once took for granted. Emotional discipline is not detachment. It's presence with purpose. It's deciding who gets your time, your empathy, your softness, and who doesn't. It's realizing that your peace is not a public utility. If someone gets angry because you didn't respond fast enough or calls you selfish for needing space, that's not love. That's control. And when you refuse to play that game, you become unpredictable, uncontrollable, untouchable. So here's your power. You don't have to reply. You don't have to explain. You don't have to carry guilt for choosing silence over noise. No one tells you that strength is lonely, that when you finally stop explaining yourself, stop pleasing everyone, stop being endlessly available, people start leaving, and it hurts. Not because you miss them, but because you finally realize they were never with you. They were with your silence, your compliance, your exhaustion. The moment you choose boundaries, you stop being useful. And the room empties. That's not abandonment. That's exposure. When you start protecting your energy, the world doesn't celebrate you. It tests you. It calls you selfish, cold, arrogant. But what it really means is, you're no longer easy to use. And that is your first taste of freedom. Carl Jung understood this well. He said the path of individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires walking away from the collective. It requires facing the pain of solitude, of being misunderstood, of being called different. But in that space, something extraordinary happens. You begin to meet yourself. This is not the kind of loneliness that breaks you. It's the kind that rebuilds you. It clears the noise. It detoxes your spirit. It teaches you to sit with your own voice without craving applause. When you stop being emotionally available to those who only valued your presence when it served them, you lose many, but you find someone far more important. You. And no, it's not easy. It will feel like mourning, because it is. You're grieving the version of yourself that tolerated too much for too long. You're bearing the people pleaser, the over-explainer, the one who said yes with tears in their eyes. And in their place rises someone unshakable, someone sovereign. So when the silence comes, embrace it. When the guilt creeps in, confront it. When they say you've changed, agree, because you have. And you're not coming back. There comes a moment, quiet, shattering, when you realize no one is coming to save you. Not your family, not your friends, not the people you bent over backwards to please. That realization breaks something, but also unlocks something sacred. Because in that moment of abandonment, when the silence screams louder than betrayal, you finally face the truth. This journey is yours and yours alone. Carl Jung called this the dark night of individuation, the phase where the old self dies so the true self can emerge. But what no one tells you is that before the rebirth, there is grief. You mourn the illusions. You grieve the roles you played to be loved. You bury the expectations that never fit who you really were. It's not just loneliness you feel. It's a funeral for the version of you that lived to be accepted. Walking alone doesn't mean isolation. It means initiation. It means shedding the false armor, the empty connections, the noise that kept you distracted from your own voice. And yes, it will hurt, but it will also cleanse. It will refine. Because the pain is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It strips away what is not real, and what remains is something no one can take from you. Clarity, self-possession, freedom. You begin to trust your solitude. You stop reaching for validation. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. And slowly, you stop needing the world to reflect your worth, because now it radiates from within. This is the rebirth. This is the fire that forges the untouchable. Not because nothing hurts you, but because you've learned to rise every time it does. And here's the truth. Very few will understand this path. Many will call it cold, arrogant, selfish. But that's because they've never walked it. You have. You are. And that makes you powerful in a way they cannot define. In a world that thrives on manipulation, your greatest weapon is not brute strength, it's psychological immunity. The ability to stay grounded when others push your buttons. The power to see through emotional traps. The discipline to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. People may not steal your money or possessions, but they will drain your mind, invade your peace, and colonize your thoughts if you let them. And the scariest part? Most of them do it without realizing it, but that doesn't make the damage any less real. Psychological immunity is not about building walls. It's about building filters. It's knowing what deserves your attention and what deserves your silence. It's walking into a room and sensing who is trying to manipulate you by guilt, charm, or fear, and smiling not because you're fooled, but because you're no longer touchable. Your mind is no longer a playground for emotional games. Carl Jung understood this when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Emotional manipulation only works when you're unaware of the buttons being pressed. But when you see the pattern, when you name the wound, when you trace the emotional strings being pulled, you cut the wires. You become sovereign. That's what immunity looks like. Not coldness, but clarity. Not detachment from life, but detachment from drama. You still feel, but you don't flinch. You still care, but you don't collapse. Because now you respond from power, not panic. And that kind of presence is terrifying to those who relied on your emotional chaos to control you. There comes a moment, quiet but life-altering, when you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's script, that your choices weren't truly yours, that your guilt wasn't yours to carry, and that your emotions were being used like levers to keep you controlled. But this moment of clarity, it isn't the end. It's the beginning of your transformation, because the instant you become aware, the manipulation starts to break, and what takes its place is freedom. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming yourself again. Not the version that was shaped by trauma, guilt, or fear. Not the version that was polite to stay accepted, agreeable to avoid abandonment, or selfless to be loved. No, this is about reclaiming your autonomy, about taking back your energy from every false role you played and becoming the one who chooses, not reacts. Self-awareness is the sword that cuts through the web of control. You start to see when someone's kindness has hooks, when guilt is just a leash, when the need to please is actually your fear of being left. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The puppet strings fall, the emotional fog clears, and you realize you were never broken. You were just bound. But this path requires courage. The courage to sit in silence, to face yourself without distraction. The courage to say no when your voice still trembles. The courage to walk away from the familiar, even if it once felt like love. Because real love doesn't require you to shrink. Real connection doesn't demand your obedience. And the truth? Anyone who only valued the version of you they could control never loved you. They loved your compliance. Comment below. What's one belief you've outgrown since becoming more self-aware? How has clarity changed the way you respond to others? This is your metamorphosis, from manipulated to master, from emotional puppet to conscious presence. The world won't always celebrate your awakening, but your soul will. And once you taste this freedom, you'll never give your mind away again. In 2025, the greatest currency is no longer attention. It's control over your own mind. We live in a world flooded with influence, emotional manipulation on social media, strategic narratives from leaders, false intimacy in relationships, and algorithms that know our desires better than we do. The story you've just explored isn't just philosophy, it's a survival guide. What Machiavelli warned about centuries ago and what Jung uncovered in the unconscious is playing out in real time everywhere. If you're not deeply aware of who you are, what you want, and why you want it, then someone else is scripting your life for you. And you won't even notice until it's too late. That's the trap. So in this year, above all, you must pay attention to what feels familiar. Not every smile is safe. Not every opportunity is pure. Ask yourself, are you reacting or are you choosing? Are your emotions guiding you or are they being used against you? You must also watch for the people who exploit silence, not to listen, but to calculate. The ones who use guilt as currency, who subtly train you to seek their validation while draining your energy. You'll see them more clearly now, not because they've changed, but because you have. Your greatest weapon in 2025 is not confrontation. It's observation. It's the ability to read the room without saying a word, to say no without a lengthy explanation, to protect your time, energy, and emotional real estate like a fortress. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone who says, I care, is here to protect you. And not every connection is a blessing. This year, learn to walk away without guilt, to be misunderstood without the need to over-explain, to let people call you distant, cold, arrogant, while you quietly build peace within yourself, your silence, your self-control, your awareness. That is power in 2025. Don't waste your energy proving yourself. Instead, invest it in becoming someone no one can manipulate, no matter how clever they are. This is your moment to stop being the pawn, to become the strategist, to reclaim your story on your terms.